Good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck, and as you can tell, I'm coming to you from the man cave. It's Thursday, March 30th, and it's a cold, windy, blustery day outside. So once again, we got to stay inside, and we got to film on the little screen. So let's see how we can get this done today. I'm going to bring you another firefighter story, and this one's got some different parts, and I'll try to figure out how to stitch it all together. Well, the other day I was watching CBS News and they had a segment on there that talked about Cal Worthington. And any of you that spent any time in Southern California, a few years ago, you know who Cal Worthington was. He was an auto dealer that built a whole network of dealerships due to some catchy advertising and slogans. Well, the story that was on the other day said that his family, Cal died about 10 years ago, and his family finally sold the last of the Worthington car dealerships. And CBS News had a pretty interesting segment about him and about his life. And if I can find that again, I'll pin a link to the comments on the bottom of this video. But that's only kind of part of it. Cal Worthington, any of you that was around, they remember if you need another car, go see Cal or whatever that was. And he was well known for his commercials featuring his dog Spot. And of course, his dog Spot could be anything from a chicken to an elephant and every kind of animal in between. But he always called it his dog Spot. And it was always entertaining and it was always interesting. And he ran so many commercials that they kind of got to be irritating, actually, because it seemed like every 5 minutes there'd be Cal Worthington and his dog Spot. He entered the Phoenix market for a while, and so we actually got his commercials up here, and I guess he was in some other states as well. But as I said, he died about 10 years ago, and may he rest in peace. But that's kind of what triggered the memory for my story for today. So back in the early 70s, our little town had a volunteer fire department, and I was the fire chief, and there's of course a story behind that too. I was initially the assistant volunteer chief, and our town was a little different than a lot of towns, and even then we had a lot of retired people, and they either came from somewhere else where they didn't have to think about the fire department, or they were just too old or not interested to get involved. And so in many communities, all the guys that are the so-called pillars of the community are also volunteer firefighters, but that wasn't the way it was here. Our outfit was we were kind of outcasts, I guess, a little bit. And so I was in the early 70s, we had a bunch of us young, aggressive guys that decided it'd be kind of fun to be firefighters. And I'm sure the TV show Emergency came out in 1972. That probably had something to do with it, and we all wanted to be Johnny and Roy. But anyway, the old guys that were on the department for many, many years, they didn't want to train, and they didn't want to be bothered with learning stuff. And so we were young and pretty aggressive, and so we ended up eventually kind of running the department. And I was made assistant chief as a volunteer at a pretty young age. And the town, which incorporated here in 1973, in 1975, they decided that they needed somebody full-time to do all the paperwork at the fire department. Well, the guy that was the chief at the time, bless his heart, he was like a father to me. He didn't want the job because he was already well vested into his retirement plan at his regular job, and so he didn't want to drop that. And so he declined. They offered the job to him and he declined. So they came out with a selection process, and I certainly had nothing to lose. I applied for it. And they actually had a pretty extensive selection process, and believe it or not, I came in number one. And so I got hired, and there wasn't a lot of the big city retired guys wanted to apply for it because it was it would have been a really tough job, and they knew it, and it didn't pay hardly anything. I didn't have anything to lose, and so anyway, I got hired as the town's first paid fire chief at the ripe old age of 26. Well, the fire service to us wasn't really a job. It was a crusade, basically. And although most of the volunteers on the department were there for the right reasons. I mean, they wanted to serve the community, but as I said, the powers that be, many of them, they didn't want to be involved with us, and so a lot of the people on the department were kind of blue-collar type folks. We had car mechanics and stuff like that made up the bulk of the department, but we also, volunteers were pretty hard to come by because, as I said earlier, the retired crowd, they didn't want to be involved in it, or they couldn't medically handle it, and they didn't want to do what it took, and so as a result, we ended up, some of the members, our volunteers, were kind of the fringe of society, maybe say. And, they were good people, and there was a lot of stuff that happened there, and that was in the age before political correctness, and we were all kind of a rowdy outfit, and as a chief and a young guy besides, I tried to keep the place organized and have everybody there for the right reasons and make sure everybody showed up when the bell rang and all this sort of thing. And sometimes being a fire chief in a department like that is kind of being compared to trying to herd kittens or something, because it just doesn't work. And but we had a lot of fun. In a department like that, morale is everything. And so we just did a lot of stuff that was kind of fun, and some of the stuff was a bit rowdy. But anyway, that's only kind of the lead up to my story. And one of the things that happened in a department like that is guys got nicknames, and so sometimes you got a nickname because of something you did or something you didn't do, or sometimes they gave you a nickname because they liked you, and sometimes they gave you a nickname because they didn't like you, and sometimes they just gave you a nickname because it just sort of seemed to fit. Well, we had a young guy that came on the department, and he was let's just say what he lacked in experience, he made up for in enthusiasm, and he was real active, and he was one of those kind of guys that if you had a fire at 3 a.m., and you were still trying to put the trucks back together at 7 so everybody could go to work, he'd be one of the last guys there helping to make sure everything got done before everybody left. He was just that kind of guy. Well, he earned a nickname, and I don't know where it came from or who came up with it, but somewhere along the line they nicknamed him Cal Worthington's dog Spot. And of course that was kind of awkward, so they ended up calling him Spot. Well, that was his nickname around the department, and it was a small town, and pretty soon the word got out. And initially, he kind of liked the attention, I think, but eventually it kind of got around, and pretty well everybody he knew in town all called him Spot, and he didn't like that very much. Well, he was on the department for quite a number of years, and then he actually moved to another town and went on their fire department there, and well, some of our guys knew the guys up there, and they kind of told him what the deal was, and so pretty soon that was his nickname up there as well. So, and he didn't like it. So he lived up there for a few years and was on the fire department up there, and then he moved back to our town, and he came in to see me, and he says, I'd like to come back on the department, but would you please tell him don't call me Spot? And so I only had limited authority over stuff like that, because kind of the guys kind of sometimes did what they wanted to do, but I told him I would do my best to try to make sure that they wouldn't call him Spot. And so I went ahead and talked to the guys, and most of them were pretty good about it. Once in a while they'd slip, but anyway. But they were looking for another nickname for him, and we get some real heavy rains here in the summertime, and we had a heavy rainstorm come in, and we had some flooding calls. And this firefighter, and I'm not going to say what his real name is because he's actually still around, and if he ever sees this, I don't want him to be embarrassed by it because it's all in good fun. But anyway, he was on an engine crew, and we were dispatched to a flooding call, and somewhere in the process, he managed to fall off in a ditch full of water. It was potentially pretty dangerous because there was a culvert there, and if he'd got sucked into that culvert, he could have drowned. But the guys were pretty close there, and they grabbed him and drug him out. And so they were looking for a new name for him. So all of a sudden, his name became Flipper because he fell in the water. If you remember the TV show Flipper, that's where it came from. So for the rest of his time, he's still around. He's older now, like we all are, and he hasn't been in the fire department for a number of years. And every once in a while I run into him somewhere and say hi. But anyway, I figured you'd get a kick out of this little story today about nicknames. I've got a couple others that I'm going to bring up. We had another firefighter who was a meat cutter, and his nickname was Meat. And I'm going to do a separate video about him because he had a pretty interesting story. So I think I'm going to let you go for now. I think that's probably long enough on this one. But I thought on a stormy, blustery day when we got to play indoors, I thought this might be a good one to talk about. So as I always tell you, have a good day. Take care of each other. Love each other. It's a wonderful life. The weather's supposed to be better tomorrow. And we'll see you on the next one. So for now, I'll just say peace out.